Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Business from the Bass Boat, powered by X2 Power. Guys, today's show is going to be a good one. It's a solo show, but I wanted to give an update first. I'm ready to get out of snowy and cold Colorado. There is the opener of the Western Toyota Series on Lake Havasu. Going to head down there, fishing that on the boater side this year. Excited about that. Haven't been to Havasu this early in the year, and I'm curious to see. I think those fish are going to be in a pretty strong winter pattern still right now. I don't think it's been crazy warm when it comes to things in Arizona that early too. I mean, early February. That's pretty dang early. I think it's going to be kind of a grind. So looking forward to the mental battle and trying to figure things out on Havasu this. I'll be leaving at the end of this week when this comes out. So excited about that. Excited to get some warmer weather. 60 degrees in the afternoon in Arizona does not sound horrible right now and sunny. Hopefully the wind stays down and it's not cold because it's been cold here. So anyways, today's topic is one that I've been thinking a lot about here lately. And it's been top of mind because I purchased a used boat at the end of 2021. I bought a 2018 Phoenix. And so it's kind of been this thought process of mine of does it make more sense to buy a brand new boat, a slightly used boat, or in my opinion, you break this in the third category, an older boat. So like let's break to make it easy, let's say brand new boat, obviously off the showroom floor at a dealership, those kinds of situations. A boat that's within 5 years old, so fairly new boat, motor's got a lot of life left on it, that kind of a thing, or a older than 5-year boat, 10, could even be 10, 15 years old, that kind of a time frame. And we're talking strictly bass boats here. And I think the other things, the big things we need to take into account are budget, the level of fishing that you're doing, are probably the two main factors when it comes to this. If you aren't tournament fishing, I think there's fantastic options. You can save a lot by not necessarily having a 250 horsepower motor or even a 200 horsepower motor, right? Like if you can save a lot by reducing costs when it comes to motors, obviously electronics and age of the boat. I don't know how super of a reliable and not having necessarily any issues on a boat you need if you're not fishing tournaments. Now, if you've got the budget, doesn't matter, right? Like you might as well go get a nice high-end boat if that's what you want. You don't want to have to deal with things. That's a great situation. And then I think like you kind of have that decision to make if you're fishing kind of that club level, weekend tournaments. Are you fishing some stuff past that where you're traveling, Toyota Series, or it may even be Bass Nation stuff where you still are wanting a very reliable situation. And then there's probably that tier past that, right? That pro level. I would argue too, some of that Toyota Series stuff, having a high quality boat is important. But I think there's some misconceptions there on quality to newness in some situations. But I basically have a list in front of me of all the things that I think are important to consider in this debate. And again, I'm not trying to sway a direction of folks. I guess more than anything, I'm trying to present kind of the pros and cons of both situations. And it's up to you and your situation on the decision on really what you want to do. And I think there's a lot that goes into this. And I'm kind of an analytical person, and I feel like took a lot of time making this decision at the end of 2021. And so I just wanted to share my thoughts, and hopefully this brings value to somebody who's kind of having this debate or looking to in the future. So again, on that category, let's break down the brand new, slightly used, and old. I think that the easiest one to kind of go through first is that older boat situation. I fished out of a 2005 Legend 18.5 foot with a 200 horsepower Mercury motor on the back that was awesome for a long time. I just got out of that boat at the end of last year, and that boat was fantastic, and it is fantastic. And I think that I didn't feel any less comfortable competing in that boat tournament-wise, really at all. It handled rough water great. I think if I was up north and on really big water all the time, I think that that's a different conversation. But for the vast majority of the time, I felt very comfortable in that boat in big water, even here on Lake Oahe, in Nebraska on McConaughey, where the wind blows, on Lake Mead out west. So things like that, I felt safe in that boat. Now, in my 21-foot Phoenix, I feel safe as well. And I think that that boat handles waves great. I've had that on Oahe this last year when it was really rough. But again, for the difference in price, I can't sit here and honestly say that there was enough there in a 21-foot boat versus an 18 and a half for the local level, for even maybe mixed higher level. So maybe a Bass Nation here and there. I fished the full Central Toyota series on the boater side out of that 18 and a half foot Legend. I didn't feel less situationally uh, disadvantaged at all. Um, but I think reliability comes into a factor at some point when it comes to that higher level. When you're spending $1,700, $2,000 on an entry fee, or gosh, in excess of that, you need to consider mechanical breakdowns, things like that. But in today's world too, new boats also have issues. And so it's kind of this debate when it comes to motor stuff. But I wanted to set that stage in the first place because I think that there's the ability to do that, especially if you're someone who is mechanically inclined. I think that's an important thing to consider is how much you are comfortable working on your own stuff. And it's interesting because I think I also have a little bit of a different background from most when it comes to bass fishing, working on your own gear, because in Colorado, we really don't have that many great dealerships, especially in northern Colorado, where I'm close to, where I feel comfortable sending my boat to go get electronics rigged. Um, I think motor stuff, that kind of a thing, I think would be fine. But again, I kind of, especially through college, did all that on my own, saving money. And I think that if you can do some of that, or you want to do some of that and have the time to do some of that, that's a great way to go with that older boat model. And even honestly, some of the newer boat stuff, it's going to happen regardless. I think the biggest thing is the simple fact that when it comes to when it comes to a new boat, there seems to be still motor issues. There still seems to be issues with your graphs. There's just, I think there's potentially less because it's a newer motor, right? But I think the biggest thing that we have this misconception of, or I certainly did for a long time, was like, okay, I drive down the highway with a truck that's worth half as much as my boat is, and I feel so comfortable and reliable when it comes to that vehicle. I could drive it across the country. I'd feel fine. I feel that same way with the boat, but at a lesser extent because I've seen it on in my own situations, on friends' boats, and at tournaments, right? Like boats break. Sorry, we got a dog coming in. But that kind of a thing is a misconception because it's like, well, I'm paying double for this fancy bass boat, yet my truck can get me anywhere. And it's, I think we ask a lot of our boats. We run them at high RPMs, from 0 to high RPMs often. And I think the other thing you got to remember is there's no transmission in a boat, like there's in a boat motor, like in comparison to a vehicle. So like you're ripping it at high RPMs, and it's a different mechanical situation. And so with that in mind, I think you have to consider warranties, insurance, all these things when it comes to this, especially as you kind of compete at a higher level. And it's a tricky thing. So I just wanted to kind of go through a couple of things here and my thoughts. But one thing for sure to consider is contingency programs. Now, contingency programs are interesting And I feel like contingency programs come out and then all the boat companies have to have a contingency program to compete, which is fair. Like it's a very beneficial thing. We're talking Toyota Series, all the Major League Fishing stuff, right? I mean, it's an extra $35,000 if you win an event running a Phoenix boat, if it's new enough. So that's something to consider with all of this is it's not just a Phoenix boat, right? It has to be within a couple of years of that new tier. And so the companies running contingency programs have to win, right? At the end of the day, it's a numbers situation. Now, I think Phoenix has a very generous contingency program to most. But the thing to remember is they are also charging everyone who wants to get into that contingency program. So I think it's either 50 or $100, depending on which package you're getting in Phoenix to be a part of that contingency program every year. So that's already helping soften that blow. Now, I don't think that necessarily is covering that, but they're making it back somewhere, right? They're seeing the value in if everyone's buying new boats every year, every couple of years to stay in this contingency program, our profits are worth it to continue to offer this. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a great strategy for businesses to do. And it clearly is working. I mean, you go to a Toyota Series event, there are Phoenix boats everywhere. And if you, as I had Todd Castledine on a while back talking contingency programs and fishing locally, it's like if you don't have a boat deal and if you're interested in maximizing that stuff, you need to be running a Phoenix if you're fishing the Toyota Series, or at least a boat brand that is offering stuff like that. But that is fantastic. I mean, even BFLs with $7,000, like that's crazy. Hard to do with other boat companies. But anyways, so that's something to really consider when we're talking new boats. I think the other thing you really need to consider is warranty. And in a time like this, we're talking early 2023, as companies are starting to see boat sales decrease, or at least have the thought process that they will decrease if we are kind of in this recession and everything going into 2023, they end up offering better warranty situations, especially motor brands I'm talking. So if you noticed, and I was right in the brink of this when I got my boat, Yamaha, Suzuki, Mercury, everyone had a less of a warranty. Now, I don't know, Suzuki might have kept theirs throughout, but the two predominant motor companies in the country in tournament fishing, right? Tournament bass fishing are Mercury and Yamaha, and Mercury leading everything. They had less of a warranty during that high time when boats were flying off the lots, 2021, 2022, right? Like crazy sale numbers, 2020, like they didn't have to have those extra things. Whereas now they need incentive to try and incentivize people to purchase more boats or motors. And that's where we get into that 5-year warranty, right? Like big warranties come out on motors and boat sales that are brand new because they're trying to incentivize people to buy. They're trying to get that incentive up. So that's something to consider is warranty. Now, another thing to remember though is when it comes to warranty, you gotta read everything to make sure things are covered. Number one, and then number two is there are also great warranty programs outside of your years that motor is good for. So those are something to consider too. Is look into those programs because there is the ability to still get a warranty on boat motors. There's brands out there willing to run that. Not necessarily brands; they're actually third party companies, that kind of a thing. And also insurance. There's some insurance policies, including mine, where there's mechanical failure coverage. That has been huge for me. So that gives you some peace of mind with things. Not to say I rely on that, but like those are ways to have some peace of mind. So I think warranty is something that's important, but also there's ways around it, and there's comfortability that you have as an angler, as an individual, and it's worth kind of weighing some of that stuff. You see a ton of boat sales, right, when guys are in that last year of warranty, 6 months left of warranty, those kinds of situations. So basically, you can sometimes get a great deal on a boat going that way, especially if there is the ability to have some extra warranty on that boat. And obviously, you want to make sure that motor's checked out and everything checks out. But that's something that can be important. That's a big one when it comes to all of this, right? Is electronics. And I think in today's world, it is such an important thing and also an expensive thing, part of these boats. And I think the perfect thought process to compete at that super high level, I don't think necessarily that you have to have brand new electronics every year, but I'm going to say between every 2 and 3 years, you probably need to be upgrading. Like things are coming out that quick, right? With Bass Fishing Electronics, just ordered a new live scope transducer, like the newest transducer. Already have live scope, already have black box, but now there's an additional transducer there. Those kinds of things I think make a big difference, and that's a consideration when it comes to buying a used or a new boat. Those older boats generally have older electronics. Now, some guys upgrade and stay diligent and on top of that. And the Phoenix I bought had some strong electronics. There's, for the most part, everything's pretty up to date. And so I didn't have to do much there. I changed a couple things out, things that I wanted, but that's something to consider when it comes to brand new versus used is right. Like when you're ordering a brand new boat, you can decide what electronics you want and how you want them set up and not have to deal with all that on the side. Again, this kind of comes back to how handy are you? If you got experience installing electronics and you want to spend the time to do that, some way you can save. This was especially crucial, I think, on the super older boats like that 2005 Legend. I put brand new Garmin's on and had live scope and had everything all set up on that. And I think that that was a great way. You don't feel any less competitive if you're fishing offshore in an old boat if you have the latest and greatest graphs, right? Like there's no difference there. That being said, you got to consider how much it's going to cost to upgrade all these graphs. When I was running the numbers, I really looked hard at I think it was like a 2014 Ranger or 2013 or I don't know, but something that was like that kind of 10 years old time frame. It was like, okay, if I can find one of these that maybe has a brand new motor on it or a newer motor or something that I'm comfortable with hours wise, what if I go in and slap brand new graphs on it and do all this stuff? And it was like, okay, with what I was wanting to put graph wise on it, like I'm going to be in another $15,000 here. And then it's like, if this boat's at $40,000 or $35,000 and I'm adding $15,000, pretty close to buying a slightly used boat within 5 years, right? So like that was kind of the debate I had is like, well, dang it, like there's actually not all that much difference here. Again, I was looking at a time when boat prices were very high, including used boats. So something to consider electronics wise, stuff's outdated. But another fantastic thing about bass fishing electronics is there's a store credit program when it comes to upgrading your graphs, right? You can sell your graphs to Bass Fishing Electronics and have that go towards your upgrade. Fantastic program. This keeps you on that level of getting new electronics when you want to. It's a trading program, right? It's just like bringing your iPhone and getting a little bit of an incentive when it comes to upgrading. Now, the difference is it's actually a lot of incentive with Bass Fishing Electronics. I've messed around with it. The prices on there, it's like getting, and it's a seamless situation, right? You don't have to go and sell that graph. You don't, it's a seamless situation to get a brand new graph shipped to you. So something to consider there. The next thing to consider, in my opinion, is a big one that I didn't think about until recently here. But for one, two things. Number one, you have to understand with insurance companies, not all insurance companies will cover bass boats and tournament bass boats that are older. They want to stay within a certain year range because they know there's more issues as it goes back, or they think that there could be potentially more issues. So, something to consider there when it comes to new used boats. That's between you and your insurance agent. I would recommend that you find someone in the bass fishing industry because I think that they understand what we do as tournament anglers, how we use these boats, that kind of a thing. So that's something that's important. With that, when it comes to having a dealer, this is something that, again, just somewhat of a disadvantage here in northern Colorado anyway, is I don't have a dealer that I'm super comfortable with. I like rigging my own boat, those kinds of things. But the trick is when you buy a new boat, a brand new boat from a dealer, they treat you pretty good. Any warranty issues, right? Like we're not, and I think this just came out with Skeeter. It was like warranty issues on the boat itself, not just motor, not just like electrical issues. Say there's a rub rail coming off, like especially when I feel like as these boat companies the last couple of years boats have been flying off the shelves, like quality on these boats hasn't been all that great when it comes to fit and finish, little things here and there, just I feel like they were kind of put together pretty quick, and trailer issues, right? Like things like that, all that stuff. If you have a dealer, you're not spending the time diagnosing and dealing with those issues. You can just take it to the dealer and get that stuff fixed and take it again. And it's all under warranty. A lot of times it's covered. You don't have to, there's a peace of mind there, number one. And number two, you aren't forking out the funds or the time to just do all that. Like as I get older, I'm starting to realize it's like, for instance, okay, I used to always change the oil in my truck. Like, why am I going to go pay someone to do this? And in college, I had a diesel pickup, and it's like, this is expensive. Like the oil to change it, all this stuff. But now with my Ford gas pickup, I'm like, I don't want to spend the time. And it's not like it takes a bunch of time, right? Like under an hour in and out to like, but it's like, if I can pay somebody else to do that and it takes 20 minutes and I can be working or doing something else, it's like, I don't know. I'm saving time doing things like that. And so it's funny because I do a lot. I'm lucky enough to have a buddy too that helps me a ton working on the boat, but it's like I'm spending a ton of time doing this stuff. And so that's something to consider when you're going brand new versus used. How handy you are, how much time you want to spend on stuff because stuff just breaks, man. Like I don't care how old or new of a boat you have, like it's just unfortunate thing about bass boats is they have problems and they always seem to. There's a lot of moving parts. Actually, there's not all that many moving parts. There's just a lot of things that break. Okay. Another big one is how far and how often you're traveling. I think this is where it really comes into the trailer aspect of things and how comfortable you are around trailers. If you are a farmer or own a landscaping company or you're constantly working on trailers, you understand trailers and boat trailers coming in and out of the water all the time, going up and down hills, especially here in Colorado when you go west and stuff. Like there's a lot of wear and tear on boat trailers and bearings go out and there's just so many issues when it comes to stuff like this. And I think the biggest thing is staying ahead and in front of that stuff as much as you can, paying attention, seeing if there's slop in your wheel. And I think when it comes to newer boats, the trailer is going to have less issues. And it's just a matter of your comfortability on working on trailers and that kind of a thing. But again, if you're doing this for a living or you're wanting to do it for a living, the more time you have issues on the road, that could be one less day of practice for a tournament. There's so many different things there when it comes to reliability. And I think as an angler, you can control only so much. And as you go up in levels, you want to have as much control as possible. And that sometimes includes spending more money to make sure all your stuff's up to par. Another huge one is, kind of went over this in the beginning, but your budget. And if whether or not you're financing a boat, I think that I'm not here to give financial advice by any means. And I think that you have to consider that from a financing standpoint. Sometimes if you are financing something, your monthly payment isn't all that much different to go brand new versus a used boat. And I think the other thing you have to consider is sometimes, just like on vehicles, there's good deals on financing brand new things. Now, I don't know if that translates as much into the boat industry because Ford has its own finance division, right? GMC has its own, Chevy has its own finance division. So there's different things there that are coming into play. They're making up for some of that by offering a 0% APR for a certain amount of time, right? So some of that is, again, going to be what you're comfortable doing and how much your comfort level is when it comes to that stuff. And that's between you and what you want to do. I think another huge factor, and I noticed this when I went from fishing out of again, this isn't a brand new boat, but fishing out of a 2005 Legend to a 2018 Phoenix, is like, okay, this boat's pretty. And I don't really want to go back through those sticks. Now, I want to still use it as a tool, but you got to remember and decide who you are and how you want to take care of your things, right? Not to say that I was trashing my Legend by any means, but it's like, I'm not afraid to go back into that stuff and maybe get a little stick that runs against the side of my boat. It's not really going to hurt it anyways. Now, do that still in the Phoenix plenty, right? Like, you should be willing to do those things, in my opinion. But that's something to consider is like, is it going to change the way you fish if you're in a brand new boat versus an old boat? Like, if you are someone that goes way back into stuff or, run stuff that maybe you shouldn't be running, it's a lot easier to justify that or not think about that when it's an older boat, right? And so something to consider there. And that's part of the aluminum debate, I think, sometimes too, is as these aluminum boats get better and better, you're not as worried about getting back into things and things like that. So important to think about. I do think I'm still always confused, I guess. Like, an Express is still a very expensive boat. Now, it's still cheaper than a fiberglass boat, but it's like, I figured it would be more discounted, being that it's an aluminum material. But I mean, I guess when it comes to graphs and power poles and motor, all that, they're not as discounted as I expected them to be. I think another big part of this, and this kind of ties into how handy you are, but wear and tear items when it comes to boats. I'd say your biggest ones, right, are your motor, your carpet, and then trailer bunks include all of that. So how much of that stuff do you really want to replace? How much time do you want to spend on that? Are you someone who really wants brand new carpet? You don't want to mess anything up. Those are kind of all up to you. And I think that another big factor is kind of the repower debate. It's like, okay, if you get a really solid, nice shape, I don't know, 2010 hull that you love the boat, the way it rides, you've been in them, you've had buddies that have had them, you maybe had one before, and it's like, okay, kind of the tactical bastion approach, right? Like, they love the champions. West Coast guys, man, there's so many champions. And you see this a lot actually at Havasu, like an old champion with a brand new motor on it, a brand new Mercury 4-stroke on it. And that's something to consider, I think. I think that the boat itself, right, it's just a platform. I think there's a lot less that can go wrong on the boat than on the motor. I think that maybe you have to replace a live well pump here and there, which could happen on a new boat too. But little things like that, you just want to be preventive maintenance. But as long as the transom's in good shape and you are comfortable and put new carpet on it, new graphs, like, there's not all that much difference there. Again, you just have to consider the costs when it comes to this, because a brand new 4-stroke motor, what we're talking between a 250 anyway. You're talking between 22 and 25 grand, maybe sometimes even more when they're in low stock like they are right now. So like hard to break some of that stuff down if you're going to go that route, because it's like, again, you start creeping up with new graphs, new motor. It's like you're now $50,000-$60,000 into this. And it's like, it's not that far from a brand new one or a slightly used one. So another thing to consider there is just the motor. And I struggle with this one, go back and forth. I still think you have less reliability issues than newer motor you have. That's just commonplace. But there are still issues with new motors. And that is frustrating to me. But it's the way it is in our industry. It's the way it is in these motors and how we treat them. And it's just like, I go back and forth on that debate because, gosh, that the 2005 Mercury EFI, 3-liter EFI on that Legend, I felt so comfortable in. I felt like I could go anywhere in the country. Always started. It was just an incredible gas hog of a motor. But like, right? Like, I don't, I think that was something that was really great. But there's also a lot of issues with older boat motors and newer boat motors. But just kind of your preference and your experience there, I think, when it comes to the new versus old motor debate. I think the last one where I think you could save on, depending on what level you fish, I think the two things. I think number one, if you are not someone who wants or needs a 21-foot bass boat, 20, like they're like 22-foot now, right? Like a lot of these big boats, I think you can save a ton on that. I think you can save a ton by getting into an 18.5-foot, 19.5-foot boat. I think that you can save on the premium package versus not premium package. It's, again, do you want the Phoenix PHX, a 921 or a 721? Love the 721 hull. That's what I'm in, right? It's a smaller boat. It's not their premium package, but like, I mean, what, Greg Hackney runs it. I think Gary Klaus runs it. Like, 721 is a great hull, but it's not their big premium package. Doesn't have the low gunnels, doesn't have all these little things. But it's like, again, just depends on how much you want to spend, your budget, what you're comfortable with. Something to consider there. So size of boat, I think horsepower. I'm someone who likes a really fast boat. I have a hard time thinking about not getting a boat with a 250 on it, especially if it's a 20-foot or a 21-foot. But that's a great way to save a little bit. If you get a 225 or a 200, especially if you're fishing maybe not that top tier level or even that mid tier. If you're not fishing tournaments, you could get away with a 150, right, on the back of these boats, or maybe a 200 if you want some get up and go. But like, even, I mean, you don't necessarily need all that horsepower when it comes to stuff, right? Like you see John Cox going 65, 60 miles an hour down the lake in his Crestliner with a 200 on it. So just depends on what you want. I like a fast boat. It's dumb, I know, but like that's what I like. So that is another one, is horsepower, size of boat, and then graphs, right? It's how many graphs do you really want? Do you need 3 up there? Do you need 2 up there? Do you need 1? Those kinds of debates, just different ways you can kind of make that decision to save and or not save. I think the biggest takeaways for me, though, as I've kind of am growing up and getting older and more into tournament fishing and fishing bigger tournaments, I think there's an important factor there with having a good dealer that I didn't necessarily think through previously. And I think that changes as I think that'll change for me if I'm not going to stay in Colorado, those kinds of things. If I'm close to somewhere where I feel comfortable with a dealer and that kind of a thing, like, that's an important relationship because you can rely on them to fix things. If questions, you need maintenance done. Like, I spend a ton of time in the off season working on that stuff. And there's just, again, like, time is money with everything. And if you're not working and you're doing this, like you got to kind of think through that stuff. And it also depends on what you want to do. And if you're a handy person and like that stuff. So those are some of my thoughts, guys. I just figured I would break down the different thoughts when it comes to that. I think that brand new tier, there is a price reduction for a couple years old. When I was looking at boats, there wasn't much of a price reduction on that first year. Maybe that second year was actually surprising because boats were priced so high, but there was a good reduction in that 4 to 5 years, like, $10,000, $12,000 difference. So some of that, it was interesting to kind of look at the trends of how much you're losing per year, how much that boat's depreciating. I went with that decision of that slightly used boat. I love it. It's great. Again, sometimes I think about, okay, what about a brand new boat? What would be different? Okay, I wouldn't have to spend as much time on some of this stuff. And so I think it all just depends on your comfort level and what you want to do. I was happy with my decision, still am happy with my decision, but just wanted to kind of lay some of that out from a personal experience standpoint. And I would love to hear in the comments below on YouTube, what do you think? Do you think it makes more sense to buy a used boat or a new boat when it comes to tournament bass fishing? Would love to see that in the comments. And then I'll post a poll on Spotify as well, try to figure that out. And want to hear your guys' thoughts. So if you guys wouldn't mind too, if you have not, please like and subscribe on YouTube and give us a rating and review in Apple or Spotify podcast. That helps us grow, continue to what we're doing here with the Serious Angler Network. And until then, guys, be looking forward to updates on my personal social media, as well as I'll probably get some stuff on Serious Angler for Lake Havasu. Excited to get down there, sunny Arizona, see how the tournament plays out. First Toyota Series of the year, fired up early in the season. So, folks, with that, I am going to get out of here. Still continue to go get tackle ready and hoping the roads get less snowy so I'm not towing a boat through the snow. So, anyways, hope everyone's doing well, getting ready for kickoff tournament season, and I hope everyone else is too. Thanks again for tuning in. Business from the Bass Boat on the Serious Angler Network.